Okay, grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Today we are featuring G-Gma, and she is going to teach us one of our favorite holidays, especially Christmas, but also Easter recipes called
Heine's bread. It's a Swedish bread or a cardamom seed bread, and an old family favorite.
And this is one that I grew up with, and we grew up in a Swedish covenant church, and so the Swedish cooks love to make this Swedish cardamom bread. And I'm just going to do a little tour of the ingredients, and you'll have the recipe. You need salt, you need flour, you need an egg, yeast, and you can either use yeast in a package like this, or you can use yeast that comes like this or in any other form, and you use 2 1/4 teaspoons per packet that it calls for. You'll need milk, butter, sugar, and then most importantly is the cardamom, a ground cardamom, and that's what gives it the wonderful flavor. All right, Mom, take it away.
Okay, well, the first step is to put milk into this big pan. We'll use this pan because we can heat it, and then we can mix in it as well. And we're using half and half. It can be plain milk, it can be dry milk, it could be evaporated milk. So we're going to measure 1 3/4 cups. And we're going to bring that, heat it, bring it to a warm but not too hot. We want to just bring it to sort of a scalding but not boiling point. So you have to keep your eye on it and watch it. A lot of times you can tell just by looking at it when it's just about ready to stop, put the heat off.
And you don't want to bring it to a boil, right, Mom?
No, you don't want to boil it. And then in the meantime, you can get ready 1/4 to 1/2 cup of margarine or butter. And in our family, we always think that butter is the best, but you could use, well, we don't usually use margarine too much anymore. It used to be a necessity.
Is that because butter was so expensive, Mom?
Well, during the war, you couldn't get butter, and they came out with margarine, and so everybody switched over and used a margarine that was just an oil.
And what war was that, Mom?
World War II.
Which Pa served that.
That's right. Yeah, that's when people started using margarine. So then you'll see it appear in recipes where they'll say margarine or butter. And this recipe says that, but you'll use butter. Now it says 1/4 cup. Well, on this butter, it shows you a little measuring guide so that you can see how much is 1/4 of a cup.
So a full stick is how much of a cup?
Well, two sticks is 1 cup. So a half of a cup would be 1 stick. Now we're not going to use a whole half. We're going to use half of that, or 1/4.
For a 1/4 cup. I'm going to get you a knife here. There you are. So 1 stick of butter is a 1/2 cup, and so we need a 1/4 cup. So this is good training in using fractions. That would be a 1/4 cup. 2/4 equals 1/2 cup, or 1 stick. And 2 sticks of butter equals 1 cup. Okay, so if we're watching this now as it's heating up, and it's just past medium heat, just to get it just to the point that it's kind of scalded, right, Mom?
That's right.
Scalded. Yeah. And you'll see there'll be a little bit of kind of steam that comes up off of it before it's ready to boil. That's when you want to catch it. What happens to milk, Mom, when it boils?
I don't know.
It separates or something, doesn't it? Yeah, I mean, it changes.
You don't want to boil it. No, then it wouldn't probably be as good. But This works out well because when you put the butter in, it melts the butter, and then we have eggs that have been in the refrigerator, and so they cool it off a little bit then. And so by the time you add some of these other ingredients, then it's cooled down enough that you can put the yeast in. You do not want to put the yeast in if the mixture is too hot or too cold. It has to be at just a sort of a lukewarm temperature to be active. Not all breads have yeast in them. Just what we call breads that rise. A lot of breads just have the ingredients, and they're very good, but they don't have yeast.
Now, I will do a separate video at some point about yeast and how yeast works. But as we're waiting for this to come to a scald, I'll tell you just a little bit of interesting stuff about yeast. Yeast is actually a living organism, and it's
now if you look here, this is done.
Yeah, look at this. Here we go.
All right, so I'm going to put that off.
See how it's a little bit steamy there?
I'll put the butter in.
In goes the butter. And since that's nice and hot, look at the butter's going to melt down nicely. There it goes. Oh, it looks like a little heart shape there, Mom. You did a little heart.
Oh, we'll take the hearts.
Mm-hmm.
Then we're going to be needing 3/4 of a cup of sugar.
What makes it nice and sweet is getting that sugar in
And
there.
then the sugar will dissolve in the warmer milk too.
So 3/4, again, using your fractions.
I'm just going to use one of these smaller cups to take it out. And there's an indicator on this side so you can measure. 3/4 of a cup. Okay. Is that ready? Looks like the butter has melted. Let's put the sugar in. Let that dissolve. Stir that around, let that dissolve.
So the heat is off now, just so you know, so you can see. There's no heat.
But you can tell as you stir it, you'll be able to hear even when it's dissolved. It sounds a little grainy right now, but after it's dissolved, you can tell the difference.
And while Mom's doing that, I'll just tell you that this Swedish cardamom bread, I remember from being a little girl, being my favorite bread. And the Swedish cooks we had at church, oh, they made such good food. And we went to a camp, and we had a Swedish cook called Tilly. And boy, did she make wonderful things. We could look forward to going to camp just to have
They're
Tilly's.
a wonderful, wonderful cook. Some of the best recipes that I still have are recipes that I got from my friends in that church.
And recipes are so, they're so important. Like these are, we say Swedish, these people would have brought these recipes over from Sweden when they came over to the United States, but they kept these recipes going because it's part of the way you're connected from one generation to the next. And so that's why it's so cool to have G-Gma showing you this, because she's the one that taught me, and now she's teaching you how to make this very special bread. And as you know, this is something that I make with the grandchildren in Colorado, Every single Christmas we make Swedish cardamom, and they always, when we talk about what do you want to do at Christmas time, they always say two things. And they'll be listening to this too. So the first thing they say are the gingerbread houses, and those are so fun. And the other thing is the cardamom bread.
Now I'm taking that off of, I mean, it's not turned on the stove, but I'm just taking it over where it'll cool off a little bit more. We put the sugar in so I can put some of these things away while I'm waiting.
And one of the things is, as G-Gma is putting those things away, I'm get back to the yeast again. So yeast you can get in several different packaging. This comes in an individual packet, and sometimes the recipe will say 1 packet. But sometimes they'll say 2 1/4, and that's equals 1 packet. And you'll see it says it on this. And this is all the same. It's inside. If you look at that, would you mind taking the top off of that, Mom? And then I'll just see. This is what yeast looks like. It's and those are living organisms, but they're asleep. Right now they're dormant, and we got to wake them up. And you wake them up by putting them into warm liquid. Usually it should be around 90, a little bit warmer than body temperature. So
Put it in about 1/4 cup of water. When we added the milk, we put in 1 3/4 cup of milk. So we're adding another 1/4 cup of liquid now. Now this is warm water, and we'll put the yeast in this to dissolve. Now how many teaspoons did you say, Diane?
Let's take a look at the recipe. Right here it says 1. Okay, so that's 2 1/4 teaspoons.
All righty.
And when you think about teaspoon or a tablespoon, the teaspoon is the smaller one, and there are 3 teaspoons in a tablespoon.
Now these are fancy little measures. I love these little things. There's one that's just 1/4 to. So since this is a little bit sensitive to measurement, you want to make sure to put the right amount in. So 2 1/4 teaspoons. If you're making a lot of bread, this is a good idea in the jar.
And some of you might get into bread baking because it's so much fun. Some people fall in love with it, and they have to make bread every day. They make a different kind of bread, and I had one friend that just adored bread making, and she found it was very therapeutic for her.
Now we're going to have to add 1/2 teaspoon of salt. It is important to put salt in these recipes. If you couldn't have salt for a reason, you'd have to find a good substitute for the recipe. And this is a little measuring spoon that's 1/2 teaspoon. And I'm going to put that into this mixture now too.
And it's good to put that into the milk mixture because salt actually retards the growth of yeast. So it's good to put it into this. The yeast, you'll just watch what happens to the yeast. Look at it, it's starting to foam up, and that's just what we want to see. That's the yeast waking up in that warm water. It's just like they've been in a long sleep. They wake up, and the first thing they want to do after they wake up is to have something to eat, and the sugar is their favorite thing to eat. So, and it's the sugar that the yeast eats, and then it off gases, these little off gases, and that's what makes the holes that are the way the bread rises. So isn't that all so cool that we've figured out? When they figured this out, that'd be an interesting study. When was yeast first discovered? Yeah, I wonder.
Well, I remember when Moses had to leave, and they had to leave quickly. They couldn't put yeast in the bread because they didn't have time for it to rise.
Oh, that's
so
right.
They had unleavened. Unleavened means no yeast. And I think the Jewish people still, part of their custom of Passover and all, they don't eat leavened bread or yeast bread. They eat unleavened bread.
And you can see, because you'll see the time that you have to have a time lapse. Whenever you do these recipes like this, you have to think ahead. It's like G-Gma and I did baked beans, and we had to think the night before to soak the beans. So as long as you give yourself the amount of time,
it's really a good lesson in patience to cook.
It is.
That's why people call them convenience stores now, that you can run in and buy something already made.
Yes.
And still yummy.
Yeah. So back to this again. You see it's just getting all nice and foamy. And you can even smell it. It starts to have that smell of bread. I actually enjoy that smell because I know what's coming.
Now I'm going to get the egg ready. I guess it just has one egg. Is that right?
That's right.
One egg. And I always like to break the egg into something else before I put it in, because sometimes you get an egg that's not so good, and you might get some shells in it that you want to take out. So I always just break it in. Look at.
Let's check it out. Looks good. Good job, Mom.
I don't want to put this in the milk if the milk is too hot, because we don't want to scramble the eggs. I just want it to mix in. I'm just going to break it up a little bit with a fork, just because I think it mixes better if you do it this way. Plus, it's sort of fun to do this.
Yeah. There's so many parts of cooking that really are enjoyable if you give yourself the time.
I'm feeling this different times to see how it seems to me. Sometimes I just take my finger and stick it in a little bit, because you can feel with your finger if it's warm or hot.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good idea.
As long as it's, I just use a knuckle.
Yeah.
Clean enough. All right. So I'm going to add this egg. This will help cool this down a little bit too, because we're getting to the point where we'll want to add the yeast.
You can hear how differently that sounds. You don't hear that grainy sound.
I think that's one of the special things about this bread, is that things are dissolved in the liquid first, and then at the very end you add the flour. A lot of other recipes, even like a bread machine, you'll put all the ingredients together and put the motor on and forget about it.
Yeah.
But this is why they call this homemade bread.
And you'll have this recipe, but I'm just going to hold this up just for a point of reference so that you actually have it. Ina, I called her Aunt Ina because she was one of Mom's friends, so she was like an aunt to me, and Ina. And Ina and Uncle Vin. And what was the name of their father, Mom?
Grandpa Bloomquist.
Bloomquist, there you go.
All right, I've added the yeast to this.
Okay,
mixture.
oh, good, yay.
And now we're going to add the flour. Just to review now, to make sure we've put everything in. We have the milk, and we added butter, we added sugar, we've added salt and the egg, and now the yeast dissolved in the warm water. Okay, 2 teaspoons of cardamom. Now we can put that right in now, and that will help it mix up with all the flour. If we put it in later, it's harder to get it to mix thoroughly. So sometimes you might forget and have to do it then. All right, we're going to mix 2 teaspoons. I have to use a smaller one to get it out, that's all.
And this is what gives it its unique flavor, this cardamom. Cardamom comes in a pod, and you can grind it up yourself. At home, I bought some so I could show you, so I'll put that in another video. But then you can buy
it's
it.
so hard to pound it, isn't it?
Oh, it is.
And make a powder out of it.
It is.
This is rather expensive. It lasts a long time, though, even longer than what they say. All right, 2 teaspoons.
2 teaspoons. Yep, you got it. Mom probably knows this mostly by heart.
Well, it's been quite a while since I've made this bread. Probably a couple, 2 or 3 years anyway. We've made it when you've been here, I think, Diane.
Yep. Yeah, we always try to make it on the holidays.
But we've been together for, not Christmas, but this year we're together for Christmas time. This Advent now. We're in the last week before Christmas, so good time to be making bread. Especially because there may be some snow coming, and it's always comfy kind of food to have.
So right now you're just trying to dissolve all
I'm just
the
stirring it around a little bit. And then we're going to start adding flour. Now this is where you want to make sure to wash your hands.
Really important to wash your hands when you're doing.
You're going to put your hands right in this.
And check your fingernails. You might want to use the fingernail brush if you're been outside working and stuff.
That's right.
And as G-Gma's washing her hands, I'm just going to show you our beautiful birds. We've had some cardinals show up today for the first time, and we love cardinals here. So if we don't happen to see the real ones, G-Ma has these beautiful cardinals everywhere in her kitchen. All right, back to our bread making.
All righty. It's hard to say how much flour. My friend Ina used to say enough flour to knead it, but we think it's going to probably take 5 or 6 cups. Now this is 4 cups right here, so it'll take more than this, but we'll start with this. And to begin with, I'm not going to use my hands because it'll mix up with a spoon just fine for the beginning.
I'm going to come around to the other side to catch this. So, and you can use a wooden spoon to do this if you want to, or a spoon, a plastic spoon, but something that has some strength, because as it gets stiffer,
that's why you have to put your hands in at the end. You can see it's still got enough liquid to stir quite easily. Now I'm going to put more flour in here.
Now, one thing I'll just point out is Mom's getting more flour. Before you start a recipe, get out all your ingredients, because you know, this is something I was telling Micah and Cody the other day, and I said if you don't, you could just be missing some ingredient that you thought you had, and you get all the way through to the end and realize
you might not be able to run across the street and borrow it or something.
That's right. That's right. Okay, so Mom has put in another like 2.5 cups into the measuring, but she won't necessarily use all of that.
I just have to sort of feel it along now. Whoops, I have to clean up a little bit here so I'm not knocking over things that I don't need. This is good to have them go right into the sink and soak them a little bit.
Yes,
Makes
always.
the cleanup so much easier.
Yes, for sure.
About this time you'll be saying, oh boy, my back's getting tired. I hope it doesn't take too much longer. It doesn't. This is the fun part though. It always takes more flour than you think it will.
to get down nice and close to this.
Okay, you can see how you could still add more flour.
You don't want to put your hands into it yet, because you'll just get your hands
Yeah.
all
Oh, yeah.
gooey. This is the most important part to see, just to get the idea of how much flour to add when it starts to get to the right point where you can take it out and start kneading it.
Now I'm going to make sure I have plenty in here, just because it makes it easier to get to.
And where are you going to want to knead this, Mom?
Well, I'm going to start out by doing it right in the bowl,
Okay.
because I can.
Okay.
And I like to put a little bit of flour on my hands too, before I put them in.
I am learning from this.
And you start reaching in when it starts getting sticky. Now a little more flour.
So when it starts sticking to your fingers, you just add a little more.
Yes, because you're going to want to clean the whole side of the bowl off. You're going to clean off the spoon with, flour. Push it off. Don't be afraid to add, because we'll knead in quite a bit. Just getting this off of the spoon. Now I'm just going to use my hand, and I'm going to try to rub against the sides and get all the loose flour and dough mixed.
And that helps you with the cleanup too. Get
Oh
the
yes.
sides all clean like that.
Bread has to rise a couple of times, and the first time I let it rise right in this pan. So don't even have to take it out to knead it on the shelf or on the a flat surface until it rises up once.
So you're pulling it off and then you're kind of pulling it over itself, is that?
I'm trying to just get it off of the sides.
Okay.
And then put it into itself, and you can see it's still pretty sticky. See, it's starting to stay together more though. And this is what, as you become an experienced bread maker, you'll know how you like to make it. And this is when my friend would say, when I'd say, how much flour again? She'd say, enough. You have to know when there's enough.
So if it's too sticky, you need more. But you don't want to just dump in tons, because you could get it too dry too. Yeah. So that's why you do a little bit at a time, like G-Gma's doing. And there's a wonderful...
This is not an easy recipe for children to make alone. This is a good recipe to make as a family or with a grown-up, whoever likes to make bread.
And if they didn't like to make bread before, they will after making this.
After they taste it.
Yeah.
Remember the little red hen? And nobody wanted to help her do all the work to making bread. And she finally had to do it all herself. But at the end, they all wanted to come and eat the bread. And she said, but you didn't help to mix it. You didn't help to wash up the dishes. And, how do you expect that you can just eat the bread without having to help making it? So This is a good lesson in that little red hen story.
Oh, that is. I didn't know that was the story. We have a bakery near us that's called the Little Red Hen Bakery.
I just gave that storybook to a little young friend of mine who's learning to read. She's 5 now, and I know she likes animals, so I thought, well, she'd probably like that. Now, if you look at what I'm doing, this would be called more kneading because I'm pulling it over, sort of folding it on itself. It's finding a little stickiness. Adding a little more flour, working it in.
I love the way you're doing this. This is different than I have done it, and I prefer it. So kids that have made this with me before, where we've turned it out.
Well, you could turn it out.
Yeah, but I love this.
But
yeah.
this is sort of, you know, when you're doing a lot of cooking, you try to economize on the number of dirty dishes you have to wash.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, if you take a look at this, it's getting to be pretty good dough for kneading. Now, I still have some I'm going to work into it here. I'm going to try to work all of that in. So I just turn it around, peel it off. Picking up the little loose pieces in the pan.
Giving you quite a workout, Mom.
It does. You feel it in your muscles. It's tiring to make bread.
This is an extra special treat to have G-Gma demonstrate this. I'm so glad this worked out.
Well, I'm having fun doing it too. It's been some time since I've made bread. You have to have a lot of people to eat it, you know. If I see it still sticking to the bottom, I'm adding just a little bit more flour so that it doesn't do that.